Okay, let's unpack this. 5 long years. 5 years of grinding attrition, bioengineered horror, and just this spiritual darkness cast across the entire galaxy.
It was a war that nearly broke everything.
It really was. It demanded sacrifices that we still shudder to think about. We're diving deep today into the source material that details that crucial final struggle.
It's the very end moments.
Exactly. The moments where the entire future of the New Republic, the Jedi, and life itself hinged on, well, a chaotic prison break, a huge theological revelation, and a daring near-suicidal assault on the enemy's heart.
It's truly the synthesis point of the entire conflict. I mean, when we examine these sources, we see a story of simultaneous collapse and creation.
And the backdrop, as you mentioned, is just bleak.
Utterly bleak. Worlds have been annihilated, major hyperlanes are completely disrupted, and most importantly, the galactic capital, Coruscant, has fallen. It's been transformed into this organic, terrifying metropolis of Yuuzhan, the crush of the gods.
Right, so we're not looking at one clean battle here.
Not at all. The sources force us to consider 3 concurrent essential crises. You've got a vital rescue mission far from the core that yielded critical intelligence.
Okay.
Then there's this critical Jedi quest about the true nature of the enemy and the Force itself. And on top of all that, the massive final military confrontation on Coruscant's doorstep.
So our mission for you, the listener, is a shortcut to understanding all this complexity. We're extracting the key insights that explain precisely how the Galactic Alliance achieved victory.
And spoiler alert.
Yep, spoiler alert, it wasn't won by a bigger Star Destroyer. We're going to show you the precise moment the enemy's faith broke, the surprising facts about their internal weaknesses, and how the Jedi Order fundamentally changed its entire philosophy of the Force to meet this challenge.
You'll walk away knowing exactly how a few heroes, armed with the right intel and a revolutionary perspective, managed to turn the tide against a seemingly insurmountable foe.
And the tide, surprisingly, it didn't start turning in the core worlds, did it?
No, not at all. It began with a micro-action that kicked off the final macro movement, a desperate, high-risk operation to retrieve key personnel and the most sensitive tactical intelligence the Alliance had received in years.
Which takes us far from any recognizable power center to the planet Silverus.
A place so far backwater it felt like the loneliest place against a sweep of white-hot stars.
But it rose to sudden, awful significance. It became the site of a prisoner of war compound, a clear sign of just how deep and how pervasive the Yuuzhan Vong shadow had become across the galaxy.
And the environment there was specifically designed to be both physically constraining and psychologically devastating.
Yeah.
Picture this dismal setting carved out of a dense coastal jungle.
Okay.
The compound itself was enclosed by these hideous walls made of uric coral.
That's the biologically grown, aggressive shell material that basically defines all Vong construction.
Exactly. And these walls, they were studded with these organic watchtowers that looked like they were thrust right out of the aquamarine sea. It created this permanent, living barrier.
And the structures inside, they weren't barracks, were they?
No. They were organic, hive-like detention buildings known as grashals. This wasn't standard imprisonment. This was containment within a living alien architecture.
So inside these grashals, you had this diverse, suffering population. Ball-domed Bith, thick-horned goat-halls, humans.
All bound by their shared misery. And outside the perimeter, the constant threat was environmental. You had this persistent, salty wind whipping through the compound. But even more disturbing was the speed at which bioengineered exotic Vong species were already starting to dominate the local jungle.
Pushing out the natural flora.
Aggressively. It was an ecosystem of occupation.
And what's crucial to remember here is the Vong's theological justification for all this misery. They had fanatically outlawed technology.
Right. They'd even perform rituals where droids were destroyed with great celebration.
Because they believed sentient species needed to be liberated from machines to glimpse the true nature of the universe. In their view, technology was a distraction from the fundamental truth established by their supreme god, Yuuzhan, through selfless sacrifice.
Which is why their use of pain was so systematic. Pain, for the Vong, wasn't simple sadism, it was a demonstration of reverence. To suffer meant to align oneself with the sacrifice of their deity.
It's a terrifying concept. It means their prison system wasn't about simply detaining enemies.
It was about forcing an existential conversion.
But inside that crucible of suffering, our sources show us pure captive ingenuity. And these prisoners weren't just random soldiers. Among them were Captain Jedder Page, a founding figure of the Katarn Commandos.
And Major Pash Kraken, who founded Kraken's flight group.
Can you just briefly summarize the significance of these two men to the Alliance's tactical framework?
Oh, they're critical. Page and Kraken were the architects of modern Alliance special operations and flight doctrine, respectively. They were defecting Imperial Academy officers who became indispensable to the rebellion and later the Alliance.
And what's truly remarkable, and a testament to their dedication, is that both had managed to become fluent in Yuuzhan Vong during their captivity.
Which indicates not only high discipline, but a profound attempt to understand their enemy's psychology and language, a huge advantage in intelligence gathering. They were high-value targets in every sense of the word.
So the escape plan had to be subtle and long-term.
Very long-term. The sources detail this subtle beginning. A clandestine message passed by a Rin food bearer, a scavenger species known for its resilience and adaptability.
And the message was, chew carefully, Major. Expect the unexpected.
That phrase, chew carefully, became the mantra. This wasn't a quick smash and grab. This was months of grueling, silent labor. They used stolen tools and their bare hands to excavate a tunnel.
And the symbolism here is just so thick. The tunnel started beneath the very fire pit where droids had been ritually slagged.
They were literally using the enemy's anti-technology dogma against them, burrowing out under the remnants of Vong's sacrifice.
It's brilliant. Fighting back using the shadow of the technology the Vong destroyed. And who led this claustrophobic effort?
The leader was a Genet Thorsh, a highly experienced reconnaissance specialist. The sources emphasize his absolute focus. They made progress measured in agonizing centimeters, especially when they hit a mass of deeply rooted yorick coral in the sandy soil.
Wow.
They crawled beneath the perimeter wall under the sentinel grasses the Vong cultivated as a natural alarm system, aiming for the distant, twisted tree line. The Bith captives, with their superior olfactory abilities, were crucial here. They could detect subtle changes in the soil and coral structure ahead of time, sensing areas of weakness.
So once they hit the jungle, the chaos truly began. It stopped being a stealth operation and became a terrifying flight for freedom.
Oh, yeah. They plunged into thick, organic muck, stumbling through stilt roots and lianas. The entire jungle immediately became an active enemy because it was just populated by Vong biots.
And the warning system.
The droning of the sentinel beetles, the prison's natural warning system, it instantly modulated to a deafening buzz, alerting the entire garrison. The response was swift and personal.
We see the pursuit, led by Garrison Commander Malik Carr. He was already demoted after a major failure at Fondor.
Right, and his subaltern Cedo. Carr was fighting for his honor, which is a desperate motivator for a Vong warrior facing internal shame.
And the Vong deployed their arsenal of bio-obstacles. We hear about the ferocious barking of bissops, their lizard hounds. But the real horror came from the air, didn't it?
Oh, the air was dominated by the seabird-like Sikvai, an atmospheric search craft powered by a Doven basal singularity.
The organic black hole generators that gave Vong ships their cloaking and anti-fighter capabilities.
But the vanguard was something far more insidious, the lavpik, or netting beetles.
The sources describe the netting beetles in a way that truly captures the Vong's terrifying mastery of bioweaponry. What made these lavpik unique on Selvaris's?
Well, these were not just nuisance insects. They were voracious and meticulous. On Selvaris, the species had been bioengineered to fly horizontally and vertically, creating a dense, sticky, warp-and-weft weave, a veritable curtain of biological fiber.
Designed to ensnare a human-sized being or slow down a repulsor lift swoop.
Instantly. Thorsh and his Bith companion, who were forced onto salvage swoops, had to rip through these webs at over 200 kilometers per hour. The sources say their faces were plastered with smashed beetle corpses, the swoop howling in protest, barely maintaining altitude as the webs dragged at their momentum.
That is the definition of a high-stakes flight. And their journey reached its climax over the estuary, which proved even deadlier than the jungle.
It was pure chaos. A pursuing coral skipper just raging through the airborne scrum opened fire, tinting the water red with the bodies of falling birds.
And Thorsh and his remaining passenger were skimming meters above the waves when disaster struck.
The Vangak, a massive Yuuzhan Vong aquatic beast, just surfaces, snags the last Bith captive in its teeth, and drags it under.
That loss, right at the brink of safety, it just encapsulates the unrelenting cost of this war. And that was the precise moment the Millennium Falcon streaked in, bringing our old friends Han Solo and Leia Organa Solo into the fray.
The Falcon, true to form, was in worse trouble than the swoops, dodging a trio of coral skippers. Han Solo executed his signature, risky, full clockwise rotation near the surface.
A maneuver only he would even attempt.
Exactly. A dizzying spin designed to briefly present the landing ramp to Thorsh, the sole surviving intelligence bearer. Thorsh made the leap onto the lowered ramp, which sealed tight just as the Falcon clawed its way into the open sky, dodging volleys of molten fire.
This successful yet devastatingly costly high-risk rescue had an immediate and massive payoff. Thorsh, the moment he was safe, began reciting the holowafer data he had memorized.
And this wasn't a standard data transfer. He recited this complex, utterly baffling sequence of numbers and formulas.
Which is where the Alliance's diverse intellectual resources came into play. The data was incomprehensible to the military minds.
So they needed the mathematically obsessed Given specialist. The Given are masters of shipbuilding and hyperspace navigation, and R2-D2's massive computational power to process it. Together, they solved the puzzle.
And what did that intelligence confirm?
It confirmed the location of other critical captives, including Paige and Kraken's son Pash, who had been captured earlier at Kalula Orbital. But more importantly, it confirmed their greatest fear. These captives were being transported directly to Yuuzhan
To Coruscant.
to be sacrificed at a major religious ceremony presided over by Supreme Overlord Shimra. This wasn't just a military objective, it was a religious spectacle.
So this rescue provided the definitive timeline and the strategic justification for the Alliance's final move. It also highlighted the shadowy infrastructure of the war, specifically the role of the Peace Brigade.
Yes, the Peace Brigade. This mixed-species renegade group who had enabled the Vong by transporting everything from amphistaps to captives for credits. The intelligence confirmed that these collaborators were now facing a reckoning regardless of the war's outcome.
They were caught in the middle.
Completely. They were mercenaries, caught between a vengeful alliance and a Vong enemy that no longer needed them. The conclusion was unavoidable. The Alliance had to move now, targeting the ceremony itself, which was scheduled to occur during a massive Vong planetary festival.
That transition is perfect. We know when they are striking and why. But before we see the Alliance flying into the heart of the enemy, we need to understand the enemy's capital, now transformed into Yuuzhan. What was the internal state of the enemy's power structure when the Alliance launched its final assault?
Well, to understand the final conflict, you have to turn to the physical and spiritual heart of the enemy. Coruscant, now Yuuzhan, the creche of the gods. The transformation was arguably the greatest single act of biological terraforming in galactic history.
The technological Sierra of Coruscant was systematically replaced by this riotous organic garden.
With verdant growth just nudging through the mist in what were once kilometer-high canyons of durasteel.
And this was cosmic engineering on a scale that it beggars belief. The sources detail the extent of this commitment. They didn't just reskin the planet, they moved celestial bodies.
Precisely. We are talking about true cosmic engineering. The planet's entire orbit was tweaked sunward to increase warmth and foster the new life. 3 of the original moons were steered away, exiled from the new cosmic order.
And the fourth?
The 4th was pulverized, smashed into billions of fragments to form this magnificent braided ring of rock and debris. The Vong intended this ring to be a bridge of supernatural light for the gods to stroll along, a sign of their triumph over technology and chaos.
But the sources reveal a fascinating dissonance. This grand vision was immediately plagued by messy, ugly biological flaws. It wasn't organic perfection, was it?
Far from it. The environment was erratic. We hear about it literally raining insects on Yuuzhan specifically, dying stink beetles, the lav peak which spattered the massive kilometer-wide dome of the Hall of Confluence. This wasn't intentional.
A plague of stink beetles. What caused this?
This plague was born of a massive logistical and biological error by the world brain, the durium, the organic consciousness that guides the planet's growth and defense. The durium had mistakenly overbred the beetle species.
That speaks volumes about the enemy's limitations.
It does. Their organic perfection was flawed, driven by a consciousness that, despite its planetary scope, could still make errors on a catastrophic scale. This meant the world brain was not a perfect god, but a deeply powerful yet fallible biological machine.
And presiding over this flawed organic empire was Supreme Overlord Shimra. Where did he command, and what was his primary driving force?
Shimra commanded from his citadel, the holy mount rising from a Yorick coral cradle overlooking the transformed planet. He presided over the Hall of Confluence, the assembly place for the Vong elite. His primary driving force was absolute theological conviction.
The war against the Alliance was just a visible front.
For him, it was merely the greater war against the gods themselves, which he saw as the Force and its users. He believed the Force was a jealous power, one that had stripped the Vong of their connection, and his mission was to prove his race superior by conquering the Force wielders' galaxy.
That's the justification for their entire anti-technology mandate, which we talked about earlier. Technology was a screen.
Exactly. And to maintain this dogma, the Supreme Overlord had to project absolute, unwavering confidence. But beneath the surface, the seeds of internal conflict were everywhere, and the sources give us these fascinating glimpses of the fracturing high command.
Let's talk about Nam Anor, the prefect. He's been a recurring villain, instrumental in setting up the Peace Brigade and orchestrating so much chaos. What was his status heading into the final confrontation?
Nominor, at this point, was outwardly subservient, having been momentarily disgraced and forced back into the role of a prefect. But he was deeply skeptical, retaining the arrogance and self-preservation of a true manipulator.
The sources capture his internal contempt for Shimra.
They do, he notes privately. You accept as truth only what your one eye shows you. He recognized the theological blind spots of the Supreme Overlord.
And then there's the bizarre figure of Onimi. He's described as Shimra's familiar ashamed one with an asymmetrically swollen head who constantly gambled around the throne, speaking in taunting riddles. Why was this figure, technically the lowest of the low, allowed such proximity to power?
Well, Onimi was explained away as Shimra's personal pet, a creature whose bizarre appearance, the swollen head, the physical deformity marked him as shamed, but whose perceived harmlessness allowed him access. The Vong hierarchy, based on pain and sacrifice, had no category for a shamed one to possess actual power.
So they just dismissed him as a warped joke.
A necessary figure of ridicule to underscore the perfection of the others. But as we will soon see, that assumption was a fatal flaw in their entire command structure.
And adding to this internal instability, Shimra pulled a massive tactical surprise just before the final attack. A new caste of warriors, the Jedi, or Slayers. Why introduce a new, specialized caste right at the end?
This was Shimra's desperate attempt to show divine superiority over the Jedi. The Slayers were specifically chosen shorter males with faster metabolic rates because their physiology better suited the rapid cellular activity of the necessary implant biots. They were armed with amphistaffs and kofis, charged with guarding Shimra and exterminating enemies.
And the disturbing detail is that they were bioengineered to physically resemble the shamed ones.
Yes. They bore the look of the lowest caste, but were mandated by divine edict. The implication was clear. Look, the true champions of the gods look like our rejects. This was a direct psychological warfare tactic designed to show the Vong that their own physical deformities, previously symbols of failure, could be converted into instruments of divine power.
Theoretically proving the Force to be a farce and Shimra's power absolute.
Exactly. And we see the immense psychological toll this war took on the Vong leadership, too. We mentioned Malik Kar, the commander who was disgraced at Fondor and sent to Romisilveris prison.
Aye.
His story illustrates the depth of the despair. After his failure, he felt such self-loathing that the sources mention he nearly draped at Kun, the living garrote, around his own neck to perform ritual suicide. This constant pressure to perform, combined with the extreme theological dogma, created commanders who were mentally fragile and prone to catastrophic error.
So on the eve of the Alliance assault, the Vong military command was struggling to maintain morale and faith, and their elite were internally fractured. This brings us back to the growing concern about Zonama Sekot.
Exactly. The arrival of Zonama Sekot and the Coruscant system was, even for the Orthodox Vong, a massive source of anxiety. Nalmanor and High Prefect Drathul were particularly concerned. Ancient Vong texts, even among the most conservative priests, made clear the existence of a world that was anathema to them.
A living, self-aware planet that appeared to fulfill prophecies of their doom.
The enemy was internally fracturing over the interpretation of their own sacred texts, just as the Alliance arrived at their gates. This deep doubt, fueled by prophecy, gave the Alliance's coordinated assault the spiritual leverage it desperately needed.
That's fascinating. So you have this highly centralized theocratic government whose own supreme leader is a puppet, whose sacred texts are being questioned, and whose planet is literally raining dead insects due to a flaw in its world brain.
What an entrance for the Alliance.
No kidding. But before the Alliance fleet could strike, The Jedi had to solve the underlying mystery of the enemy, which takes us out to the unknown regions.
That's right. While the Alliance was executing the rescue and planning the military assault, the Jedi were engaged in a quest of existential importance. Luke Skywalker, Mara Jade, Jason Solo, and others had been traversing the unknown regions for almost a year, looking for the legendary living planet Zonama Sekot.
And communication was erratic.
A nightmare. The war's disruption of the holonet made coordination almost impossible. Their goal was singular: to understand the Vong's strange invisibility to the force of phenomenon that had crippled the Jedi since the war began.
And this quest fundamentally shifted the Jedi's understanding of the universe. It introduced the concept of the Unifying Force, which was a philosophical bomb dropped right into the heart of Luke's new Jedi Order.
It was.
Okay, so break this down for me. If the Jedi primarily focused on the living force up till now, the immediate conscious energy of all life, what fundamental shift does understanding the unifying force represent?
That is the core difference. The living force deals with the ebb and flow of life, the now, the immediate environment, the intuition that guides a lightsaber deflection. The unifying force, by contrast, is the cosmological view.
The big picture.
The biggest picture.
Okay.
It encompasses destiny, time, and the deep structure of the galaxy, the long-term destiny of all life, connecting past, present, and future in a single vast current. The Vong's seeming invisibility wasn't a flaw in the Force, it was a limitation in the Jedi's perception.
So the Vong were so far removed from the natural current of life that only the cosmological unifying view could truly register them.
Precisely. And this concept is often attributed to the late Jedi Master Vergere, who had willingly spent 50 years among the Vong before reappearing and dying. She was the one who saw the Vong not as outside the Force, but as profoundly damaged by their own history.
Her legacy was the foundation of this understanding.
For sure. She maintained that Luke's previous reliance on the living force kept him focused too narrowly on immediate threats. To see the Vong, the Jedi had to look beyond the trees and see the entire forest, a universe where light and dark, chaos and order served a grander unifying purpose.
And the sources single out Jason Solo as the primary agent of this philosophical shift. His experiences, his captivity, the embrace of pain, receiving the slave coral scald to his unique Vong sense. What does this allow him to do?
The Vong sense was an almost visceral, raw ability to feel the Vong not through the Force in the traditional sense, but through their biological life force and their disconnection from it. It was painful, difficult, and completely unique. Through this, Jason came to a radical conclusion.
Which was?
That the Jedi's traditional emphasis on controlling emotions, controlling the environment, was actually blinding them to the Force's true expansive nature.
So he essentially believed that the Jedi had been fighting the war wrong because they were trying too hard to control the flow, rather than simply moving with it.
Yes. For Jason, acting in accordance with the Force meant acting in accordance with the wish of all life to enlarge itself, to expand and thrive. He began to believe that light and dark mingled in curious ways, and that he no longer feared the dark side if he could achieve true harmony and alignment with the unifying flow.
That is a heavy philosophical shift, especially for a Jedi. The critique noted that this seems dangerously close to the dark side, which often emphasizes rejecting external control for intense personal power. Is Jason's new understanding presented as universally correct in the sources, or is this viewed as a moment of great personal risk for him?
Oh, it is absolutely presented as a moment of great personal risk and controversy within the fledgling new Jedi Order. Luke initially was very wary.
I can imagine.
Jason's approach relies heavily on an almost intuitive, non-judgmental acceptance of destructive forces as necessary components of the larger flow of life. Where the dark side uses destruction for selfish gain, Jason believes his Vong sense allows him to understand the necessary purpose of destruction. But the line is incredibly fine.
So he's walking a razor's edge.
Constantly. The sources show Jason is constantly wrestling with the temptation of power versus the true pursuit of understanding. His transformation is crucial to the plot, but it comes with a massive moral question mark hanging over his head.
And the ultimate confirmation of this new understanding came through Zonama Sekot itself. When the Jedi finally found the planet, its guiding intelligence, Sekot revealed a secret that rewrote Vong history entirely.
And this revelation is truly shocking. Sekot revealed that the planet was the seed of Yuuzhan, the primordial homeworld of the Vong. This wasn't some random world. This was the original source of the Vong civilization long before they came to this galaxy.
So the Vong weren't fighting an alien species for its territory. They were fighting a long-lost, living connection to their own origin.
Precisely. Sekot explained that the Vong were not created Force-resistant. They were banished and systematically stripped of their connection to the Force by Sekot's parent world due to their excessive violence, conquest, and refusal to live in harmony with other life.
A catastrophic spiritual amputation.
That's a perfect way to put it. It forced them to embark on their long, violent journey to this galaxy. The banishment was their origin trauma. It led them to create their violent pantheon of gods Yuuzhan Vong to replace the lost guiding consciousness of the living world, the Force itself.
This explains their infamous empty eighth cortex, the part of the Vong brain that can't sense the Force. They weren't born that way, they were made that way.
Correct. The Shapers shouldn't create new biots in isolation. They couldn't because they were separated from the Unifying Force. The entire foundation of their culture, that they were the rightful heirs superior to the Force users, was a lie they had been telling themselves for generations to cope with a millennia-old spiritual banishment.
And this realization had an immediate, profound effect on the Yuuzhan Vong High Priest Harar, who'd been captured on Sekot.
Harar's faith just shattered. When Sekot confirmed this history, Harar saw that the gods he worshipped were inventions, and the true force of creation, the one they had been fighting, now looked upon the Yuuzhan Vong with absolute disfavor.
Fulfilling their own prophecies.
It fulfilled the Vong prophecies of a world anathema to them. Harar, now viewing Sekot as their true home and the Force as the genuine guiding hand, vowed to help the Jedi bring about a resolution, the ultimate defector.
And beyond the theological victory, Sekot provided a critical tactical advantage: the living ships.
Yes. The living starships grown by the Jistari, the cybernetic organisms on Sekot, these were X-Wing-sized fighters grown specifically for the Jedi pilots Kip Duran, Corran Horn, Saba Sabatine, and others. To fly them, the pilot had to bond with the formative seed partners, creating a true mental connection with the ship.
They were alive, they hurt when hit.
And they used miniature dove and basil analogs. Their organic nature, being grown by a living world, caused massive chaos for the Vong commanders. The Vong commanders immediately noted how the sight of these Sekotan fighters threw their coral skippers into disarray. Their Yamisks, the war coordinators that guide Vong fleets, had trouble differentiating friend from foe. It broke their tactical network.
But the Alliance still held a dark card that complicated everything: the bioweapon, Alpha Red.
The Alliance Command, fearing total defeat, had authorized Alpha Red as a last resort contingency, even over Luke's vehement protests. The Vong got wind of this and attempted to deploy a contaminated vessel against Zonama Sekot.
And the Jedi's fear was immense.
They believed Sekot's goal was not to flee or fight, but to allow the poison to reach the surface so the living world could contain it, martyring itself to prevent Alpha Red from being spread to the rest of the galaxy.
And Sekot's response?
Sekot refused to flee a second time. Having abandoned the Vong in the past, Sekot felt a profound sense of responsibility to the galaxy. It engaged the Vong fleet, using its own living ships and immense power, willing to fight or sacrifice itself. This made the stakes absolutely ultimate, just as the main Alliance fleet began its final thrust towards Coruscant.
So the theological and tactical elements were now perfectly aligned for the final bloody confrontation.
Exactly. With the intelligence from Selvaris confirmed, the Alliance mobilized a force unprecedented since the Clone Wars. They brought together everything they had. Bothan, the reformed Imperial remnant led by Grand Admiral Pelion Hapan Mon Calamari.
And the strategy had to be brilliant, because the Vong fleet guarding Yuuzhan was immense.
It was a tactical masterpiece, masterminded by Admiral Crefe, the Bothan commander. The initial gathering point was Mon Calamari Extreme, where they presented this massive decoy fleet. It was arranged in a defensive, Yamis-like formation battle groups forming tentacles around a fortified core.
It looked like a full-scale assault designed to force the Vong to commit their entire reserve.
Right. They were baiting War Master Nazchoka to believe the victory hinged there.
But the real target was Coruscant.
The real target was Yuuzhan. The strategy was to sow massive confusion, using fast ships to strike and fade at the Vong tentacles at Mon Calamari, drawing attention, while simultaneously creating a critical window for the assault on the capital. This attack was precisely timed to coincide with the planned Shamed One's uprising on the surface.
Leveraging that theological schism we just discussed.
Perfectly. Nazchoka, the War Master, initially fell for it, but he eventually realized the danger. As the Alliance decoy fleet inflicted severe damage and refused to commit fully, Choka realized the Alliance was making a deep thrust toward the core, a move he hadn't anticipated because, tactically, it seemed suicidal.
By the time he recognized the true danger, it was too late.
The Alliance capital ships had begun the grueling penetration of the Coruscant system.
Describe the descent. It sounds terrifying.
It was an atmospheric nightmare. The Alliance capital ships had to burn a tunnel through the atmosphere itself and, critically, through the pulverized moon fragments that formed that braided ring. It was essentially flying through a constant low-density meteor shower.
Once they breached that, the commandos were the first in.
Captain Jenner Page's commandos, encased in envirosuits and jetpacks, soaring down to the surface alongside Wraith's squadron, the Alliance's elite stealth and infiltration unit.
But the Vong defenses were brutal.
Oh yeah. Jagged Fell's Claw craft, which was providing close air support, was brought down by artillery fire from a massive reptilian Yuuzhan Vong beast known as a Rakamat. These things were essentially living siege engines, capable of spitting enormous globs of burning acidic shrapnel.
Wow.
The loss of Fell's fighter, even though he survived, showed the cost of simply riffing the surface.
Meanwhile, a vital secondary mission targeted the world brain, the Durium. Han Solo, Leia, Herrera the Defector, and Noghri allies were tasked with disabling it. This sounds nearly impossible.
It was designed to be impervious. The world brain was protected by an impenetrable sphere of your coral. And here's the Vong brilliance and horror. That sphere had enzymatically digested and absorbed the old Senate Duracrete and armor plating of Coruscant, fusing them into a new, impossibly dense organic shell.
So traditional weapons would just bounce off.
Or be absorbed.
So how do you disable the consciousness of a planet when its shield is fused with the remnants of the old capital?
You rely on the intelligence of a desperate defector and the reckless skill of Han Solo. Harar, the former priest, suggested the impossible. The world brain's dome had a small, narrow channel, a hedge tunnel, grown specifically by a shaper to allow maintenance access. It was only about 25 meters wide.
Barely enough to fit the Millennium Falcon. He had to fly the largest light freighter in the Alliance fleet through a winding organic tunnel guided by scent markers. That sounds like a pure suicide run, even for him.
It was absolutely insane. The tunnel required a shaper's scent markers to safely navigate, a sequence of pheromones Harar somehow understood. Han, ever the rogue, didn't hesitate. He accepted the challenge, tightening up his crash webbing and famously telling C-3PO, "You too, Goldenrod," before plunging the Falcon into that tight space.
Incredible.
The sources detail the agonizing navigation through chasms and corridors thick with smoke and organic muck. It required pure, raw, instinctive piloting to avoid scraping the coral walls, which would have meant immediate collapse and death.
While Han was flying his hedge tunnel, the internal uprising was starting on the surface.
Yes. At the place of hierarchy, the symbolic center of Vong power, Nom Anor, playing his final hand, pretended to be the long-prophesied Prophet Yuuzhan. He rallied hundreds of shamed ones, his flock of heretics. These shamed ones, who had been ostracized and crippled by their own society, surged against Shimra's slayers during the sacrifice ceremony to rescue the Alliance prisoners.
And this is where the Jedi acted as ideological catalysts.
Crucially, Kent Hamner and Tahiri Vela, joining Page's commandos, didn't just fight, they spoke to the shamed ones. They promised them that the Jedi would help them find their way back to the Force, to the living connection their own society claimed they had lost. This promise galvanized the insurgency, turning a simple riot into a theological revolution.
Amidst this chaos, one of the most personal confrontations of the entire war took place. Mara Jade versus Nom Anor.
This was Mara's mission of vengeance. She pursued the slinking Nom Anor deep into the lower, ruined levels of Yuuzhan Tar, navigating cracked ceilings and oozing filth. She engaged him in brutal, methodical, hand-to-hand combat, delivering punishment for years of betrayal and violence.
The sources list her accusations.
His crimes on Monor II, his creation of the Peace Brigade, his calculated role in Chewbacca and Anakin Solo's deaths, and his sabotage at Zonama Sekot. She was delivering a personal judgment for the galaxy.
A very personal one.
Nom Anor, beaten and pleading, recognized that Mara was now a mother and might be less inclined to kill. He claimed he had changed and desperately offered to help. He was a survivor above all else. Mara accepted his help, but immediately placed him on a very tight leash.
But the true turning point, more devastating than any physical battle, was the world brain's betrayal.
Absolutely. This goes back to Jason's unique Vong sense. As Luke and Jaina headed for the Citadel summit, Jason used his unique connection to reach out to the Durium. He connected with the world brain, promising to end its profound inner conflict.
The brain was at war with itself.
Deeply. It had followed Shimmer's command to destroy its own creations and transform Coruscant. But it was deeply regretful. agonizing over reneging on its fundamental pledge to compel Shimra to compromise with the outside galaxy.
The world brain essentially suffered a planetary-scale nervous breakdown.
Yes, a breakdown driven by self-loathing. Realizing it should simply ignore Shimra's destructive commands, the brain began causing massive, widespread groundquakes, which physically started tipping the entire citadel, which we must remember was not just a temple, but a colossal, disguised escape vessel.
This seismic activity threw everyone into disarray.
And bought Luke and Jaina the time they needed, which leads us to the final confrontation in Shimra's coffer, his escape bunker at the Citadel's crown. Luke, Jaina, and Jacen confront the Supreme Overlord, expecting him to be the ultimate power.
But that was the fatal assumption.
The final, terrifying revelation was that Arnemy, the physically deformed, shamed one familiar, was the true power. He was not a pet, he was a master biosculptor who had been weaving the events of the war, controlling Shimra as a puppet king. Arnemy had engineered the Supreme Overlord to be an impressive, yet ultimately mindless, frontman.
The single greatest ideological reversal the Vong could face. The lowest caste controls the highest. What was Arnemy's motivation?
Arnemy was the true heretic. He saw himself as fighting the gods themselves, the Force users, and was shocked when he looked at Jaina and Luke and suddenly saw them through the Force. This suggested that Arnemy had not only engineered Shimra, but had also achieved a level of control over the Vong's Force nullification technology, or perhaps even discovered a way to partially restore the Vong's connection to the Force within himself.
That is immense. This master biosculptor, who embodied the Vong's shame, had actually been the grand architect of their invasion and the puppet master of their faith.
The war became a battle of wills. Jacen, recognizing that Arnemy was attempting to launch the Citadel vessel into space, which would ensure his escape, poured all his strength through the Unifying Force to overpower the Master Shamed One. He forced the Citadel escape craft to lock down.
And Shimra.
Shimra was killed by Luke in the chaos, his amphistaff delivering a fatal, albeit poisoned, blow.
And in the final, messy moments, what happens to Numenor?
Numenor proved his ultimate commitment to self-preservation. Despite being on Mara's leash, he saw his chance. Using his unique knowledge of the Citadel vessel's mechanisms, he activated the escape craft lock, the one Jacen was trying to keep secured, and jettisoned himself from Mara's control, sacrificing the ship's integrity to survive.
And Luke.
Luke, poisoned by the amphistaff, was moments from death, but was rescued by Han and Leia, who arrived just in time via the Falcon. Shimra was dead, Arnemy was defeated, and with the Supreme Overlord, the conduit to the gods gone, chaos and immediate self-destruction gripped the remaining Vong fleets. The war was effectively over.
Which brings us to the dawn of this new order. Shimra's death led to immediate, widespread military collapse.
Hundreds of Vong vessels self-destructed or deserted their posts. War Master Naschoka, realizing the game was over, led surrender negotiations at Ral Roost, the Alliance temporary capital.
The political calculations following this victory were immense. We talk about war crimes, tribunals in every galactic conflict. How did the Galactic Alliance approach prosecuting the Vong leadership?
Admiral Crefe and the new Republic Chief of State, Kalomas, had to walk a very thin line. They ultimately avoided a large-scale war crimes commission against the Vong leadership. Their reasoning was intensely pragmatic.
How so?
Trying Naschoka, while morally satisfying, would lead to unending war, allowing scattered Vong commanders to dig in and fight to the last, perpetuating the conflict for generations. So instead, they focused on systemic change and rebuilding.
So, who paid the immediate price?
The Alliance instead allowed individual systems to pursue justice against collaborators, specifically the Peace Brigade, who had no unified military structure left to protect them. This focused the short-term political anger on those who had betrayed the galaxy for profit,
while allowing for a strategic peace with the remaining Vong leadership.
Exactly. And the terms of surrender were radical, particularly concerning the transformed capital.
They were utterly revolutionary, weren't they?
For sure. The Galactic Alliance demanded that Vong commanders return to Coruscant, with Naschoka assisting in hunting down defectors, and crucially, that Vong Shapers assist the Alliance in reconstruction by persuading the world brain to reverse some of its aggressive changes. This led to a stunning, profound compromise.
The world brain, the Durium, would remain at the center of the galaxy.
Right at the core. They chose to leave the living enemy consciousness in place. It was deemed necessary. The world brain was now a foundation for an enduring compromise. It held the keys to reversing the Vong transformation of Coruscant, and perhaps, more importantly, it represented the Vong's connection to the life force, a connection they desperately needed to relearn. By leaving the Durium at the core, the Alliance committed to a shared, monitored future.
For the Jedi, the conclusion of the war brought the culmination of that philosophical shift we discussed earlier. Luke, still recovering from the amphistaff poisoning, had his new understanding solidified.
His recovery was almost as much spiritual as physical. Luke realized the Force was more embracing than he ever knew. His experiences with Sekot and Jacen's insights confirmed that light and dark were not always opposed, but mingled in curious ways, serving a grander design.
So the goal of the new Jedi Order was now defined.
It was to act in harmony with the will of the Unifying Force, not against it, which gave them a mandate to seek out and understand other Force traditions.
In Jacen's path, having been the epicenter of this philosophical upheaval, took a dramatic turn.
It was the most altered. He decided against bonding with a living ship, rejecting the path of the warrior guardian. Instead, he chose to wander the galaxy, seeking out other established, lesser-known Force users, the Jensari, the Theran listeners, perhaps even the vanished Falanasi. He needed to broaden his understanding of the Unifying Force beyond the traditional Jedi versus Sith duality.
He didn't want to be at the center of control. He needed to be the seeker.
Right. In contrast, his sister Jaina, the Sword of the Jedi, reaffirmed her commitment to the fight and the immediate security of the galaxy. She was the pragmatic anchor. She prioritized her active role, postponing an immediate personal life with Jagafel. She stated clearly that she had too much of her mother and father in her, the action, the commitment, to give up her active role just yet.
And the end of the war also marked a shared future with the Vong converts. Zonama Sekot prepared for another hyperspace jump.
Yes, Sekot was never meant to stay. It prepared for a final, massive hyperspace jump, taking the priest Harar and his followers, those Vong who chose spiritual reconnection over war with it. Harar accepted the new history. Sekot was their true home, and the Vong must now learn to live without war.
And finally, there was a quiet, intensely personal reconciliation for Leia.
This is a beautiful, reflective coda to the entire conflict. Leia received a gift from Grand Admiral Gilead Palaeon, the commander of the Imperial Remnant who had allied with the New Republic, a moss painting by the Alderaanian artist Ub Kador.
The painting depicted insectoid figures running toward a tempestuous sky.
And Han, ever the blunt interpreter, explained the message he saw. It was an admonition to meet darkness squarely with light. This allowed her to finally reconcile with the ongoing conflict over her parentage, that Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader were one and the same person. The war had forced everyone to confront their deepest fears, and for Leia, that message allowed her to emerge from the Sith Lord's shadow and finally accept the complex legacy of her father.
Wow. And the political balance sheet of the war fundamentally reshaped galactic influence.
Oh, dramatically. While the Alliance won, the power center shifted. Bothans, Celestins, Hepens, and even former Imperials rose in influence.
And those who fell included the Hutts, whose reputation was destroyed by their deep association with the Peace Brigade. We also see non-Alliance forces getting recognition, notably the Mandalorians.
That's right. Even non-Alliance entities like Boba Fett and others wearing traditional Mandalorian armor were noted in the sources as actively helping liberate worlds like Ord Mantell and Gindeen during the final push, securing respect and a new political foothold for their people in the new Galactic Federation of Free Alliances. The entire galaxy was now starting fresh.
So we've covered everything from Thorsh crawling through muck under a slagged fire pit to Jacen literally force-coaxing a planetary world brain into betraying its master. The victory required an incredible balance of micro-level actions, high-stakes piloting, and macro-level forces.
And it culminated not just in a military victory, but in a profound theological and philosophical collapse within the enemy itself.
That's the core insight here that this deep dive provides, isn't it?
It is. The Yuuzhan Vong were fighting a war they were programmed to lose. Estranged from the Force and their own original homeworld, their entire power structure, built on the rigid dogma of Shamra, crumbled the moment their primal separation from life was revealed by Zonama Sekot.
And the final, radical compromise leaving the world brain on Coruscant is the ultimate political consequence.
It forces the Alliance to live with the remnants of its enemy, literally at the core, and forces the Vong to re-engage with the life they once scorned.
It is a stunning, complicated resolution, forcing everyone, Jedi included, to expand their definition of life, death, and power. The era of the simple fight between light and dark is definitively over.
Which leaves us with the defining question for this new era. If the Yuuzhan Vong's violence was truly the result of their original parent world stripping them of the Force, and if the new Jedi Order now seeks to understand the Force as a grand union of light and dark, embracing the Unifying Force, what responsibility does the new galaxy have in helping the banished Yuuzhan Vong, those who left on Zonama Sekot, and those who remain in the core, find their way back to the Force and thus to enduring peace?
It's the question that will define the era to come, determining whether the galaxy can truly heal or merely rebuild.